In Milan, Italy, a lawyer called Massimiliano Seregni joined thousands of families across Europe who were donating their baby's cord blood at birth.
Come tutti I genitori, quando si è in attesa del proprio figlio, si pensa...
Like, when you're expecting a child, you start worrying about how to set them up for the best future possible. You want to give them every chance you can.
Ovviamente c'era anche la possibilità di conservare le cellule.
One thing to consider is saving their cord blood cells.
Many of these families were drawn by the same concept. I want to protect my child and my family against future harm. I'm banking on the idea that maybe just one day I can use those cells if I need them. Massimiliano heard about all of this, not at the baby fair like Louis Daniel or on the internet, but at a well-known city hospital.
I primi contatti li abbiamo avuti presso un ospedale qui a Milano.
We first heard about it at a hospital here in Milan, where CryoSafe put on a conference with help from the hospital's own doctors.
CryoSafe con l'affiancamento anche dei medici dell'ospedale stesso. Indubbiamente la CryoSafe si presentava...
CryoSafe definitely made a great impression from a marketing standpoint. I mean, they convinced us. They answered all of our questions as parents. It totally convinced us. Our friends had given us good feedback, plus the presentation was at a well-known hospital, so yes, it felt like a trustworthy option.
And so Massimiliano decided they would keep their child's cord blood at birth. Then, shortly after his daughter was born in 2012, the blood was drawn from the cord, whisked away, frozen, and stored by CryoSave, the largest cord blood banking operation in Europe.
Storing stem cells is pretty unique because, well, you do it hoping that you'll never actually need to think about them again. Conservation's only useful as a hypothesis in case something comes up down the line, you know?
And then Massimiliano forgot all about it. I'm Angela Saini. This is Lost Cells, an original Swiss Info podcast in collaboration with Piz Gloria Productions, Future Proche, and Studio Orcenta. "600 miles east of Milan, in Belgrade, Serbia, Tatiana and Ratko were far from forgetting their own daughter's cells. Her cord blood was banked with CryoSave, the same company that Massimiliano had used. They had heard about a promising new trial at Duke University in North Carolina, headed by Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg. It was aimed at treating autism. They hoped it could help their daughter, Isabella.
What they saw over a few months, they say, was remarkable. Kristen Dickerson joins us now with their journey and new hope for so many families. Kristen.
Yes, Brian and Meredith.
The problem we're having, honestly, is we've had so many families reach out to us that we just don't have the capacity to get them in quickly. So a lot of people are frustrated because, we have a waiting list.
Tatiana and Ratko had already overcome a lot of hurdles to convince Duke to consider Isabella, even though she didn't speak English. Around the time that Isabella was 5, they got the green light from the university. Now, all they needed was to get the cord blood cells to North Carolina. But there was a hitch. Tatiana never imagined it would be about paperwork.
In the later part of their program, they developed the option to not be in the study, but just pay an amount of money to join if you had your own bank cells. And the problem they had with CryoSave was that CryoSave had failed to inform me that they needed some paperwork and blood tests from me at delivery.
Now, if you remember, Tatiana's delivery was far from straightforward. She had a C-section and things got pretty hectic in the operating room.
Well, I have to say that the process was I have no better word but to say stupid. And I will explain why. I was having a C-section and I was awake, so I had spinal anesthesia. And the person who was collecting the cells was a man, and he started talking to me and explaining to me something about something that I need to do when I finish having a baby, which he was telling me in the middle of having a baby. And I don't know if he wanted me to write these things down, I don't know. What he was telling me at that moment is that he needed paperwork from me, that I needed to, after I came out of the hospital, to fill out this paperwork. And that later became a problem because I didn't fill out this paperwork, because I had obviously completely forgotten about it.
Hang on a second. Did you hear that? There was paperwork missing that she was supposed to remember to sign right after her delivery. Now, for me at least, those hours, even the days after I gave birth, were a complete blur. Could anyone be blamed for not paying attention to paperwork at a moment like that?
When I was delivering the baby, so that the paperwork for the banked cord blood would be complete. And they needed some viral tests from me, some medical history, and they had never informed me that this was necessary, and our sample was banked without that. We received an email from CryoSafe that everything was fine, that our sample was adequate, that it was banked, and we never got information that it was missing paperwork. So when we talked to Duke, they said, without this paperwork, we legally cannot infuse this. It's just not doable.
Tatiana and Ratko started making frantic calls. They talked to Duke, they talked to CryoSafe.
Left, right. We went from one to the other. And then, honestly, in May 2018, my husband had a business trip to Zurich, and we found a law office in Zurich, which was specializing in health law.
And with Ratko's background as a lawyer and his legal contacts, they set up a meeting with a Swiss law firm. As far as she remembers, they called CryoSafe and basically read them the riot act, along the lines of, it's been almost a year and you haven't done anything. From that point on, she doesn't know what happened behind the scenes, but the wheels started to turn.
We didn't really do anything about this, but CryoSafe, the person responsible in CryoSafe for communicating with us, called us and said, we'll sort something out, just be a little bit more patient. I said, okay, I'll give you a month or two. And after a few months, they called and said, it's okay, we've agreed with Duke on this and your cells can go.
Getting that news was bittersweet. The delay that took almost 2 years was frustrating, but they were most concerned about Isabella. Time was of the essence for her getting any kind of treatment as she was getting older each day. Things needed to happen.
And then there was again a period of something from December to January where they were again having some trouble inside the company with some paperwork, but they told us that our cells were specifically banked physically in Belgium, I think, and that they needed to get them to Switzerland, but because of Belgium law, they have to have an employee of some kind of type in Belgium to sign this paperwork. They don't have this employee there. So this was again lost time from beginning of December to sort of end of January, February. And then during that time, again, waiting, hoping.
But like they say about contracts, the devil is in the details. And Ratko and Tatiana say when they read theirs, they found out that it was their responsibility to transport the cells. So think about it. There are these cells in a special tank that is extremely cold and needs constant, steady refrigeration. Obviously, that's not easy.
And we thought that this is our job to transport the cells. But they said, no, we're going to do it. It's a big thing for us, whenever we, send cells for therapy, it's a big thing for us because it shows people that, cell can be used today even in treatments of existing diseases or illnesses or problems.
She was reassured by that and from everything she had read.
And even if you ask anybody who works with stem cells today, when you are releasing stem cells for therapy, there is always a person going with these stem cells because it's quite important that they reach their destination. And we were naturally expecting for this to happen. There's a big transporting unit which is cooling with, liquid nitrogen, but there's a person next to this unit making sure this unit travels well, doesn't have a bad trip.
And as the cells were being prepared for their flight to the US, Tatiana and Ratko were also planning their own trip, unrelated to the cells. Everything seemed to be fine, so they flew off to London.
And we were in the UK as the transport was supposed to be taking place. We were in London expecting that, everything would go smoothly. And ultimately, after all of the problems that we had with getting the stem cells to be approved to be sent to Duke University, we expect smoothly from now on.
That was on a Monday.
And they were supposed to be at Duke Wednesday afternoon at the latest.
She felt, there is something wrong. We are not being told that the stem cells arrived. So we were planning the trip to the US, but we still didn't get the confirmation about them receiving the stem cells. So she realized there was something wrong.
They missed so many flights. We don't know why. We have the travel log, and they were sometimes missing even 2 flights. Like they arrive and they don't even go on the next 2 flights. But the biggest issue was that somebody in the customs of New York airport opened the cooling thing, whatever it's called. And that's how the cells got destroyed, because there was nobody traveling with them, and the customs office does reserve the right to open this, and they opened it, and there was no way. The temperature has to be extremely low. I forgot, but it's say -50, -70, something like that. Once you open it, it's impossible for this temperature to be maintained. And not only that, but if they had made it from New York to Washington, it's not hard to travel from New York to Washington in a few hours by plane. But it took the cells 2 days to travel. They arrived late Friday afternoon, and the courier delivering them to the Duke lab told the person who was receiving this, "Don't worry, you can open it tomorrow, it doesn't matter much. It's still gonna be cold." But everybody was telling it's fine, don't worry, the machine can keep it cool for like a week or even 10 days, don't be upset, it's okay, don't worry. So Saturday, I have kind of no news, and I'm thinking this isn't so good. There was only one person who ever talked to anybody. And he answered and he said, I'm really sorry. And I realized what had happened, and I started crying, and it was a very sad moment because, first of all, you've worked for so long to get there, and then this happens. We didn't know if we would ever get any opportunity like that, and we felt like we had failed our daughter in a very important way.
For Tatiana and Ratko, this was only the beginning of their grief. For the opportunity that had been lost, for the hope and the trust they had placed in this whole process. But like for many people in a grief cycle, the first stage of disbelief turned quickly to something else.
And hoping to get some information from either side here, we went into, I would say, attack mode, and we started doing the research on our own. We started contacting as many people as we could. We were trying to get information about from their employees.
The more calls they made, the more they uncovered, the more they knew they found themselves on a new path, a mission to get some answers and to hold people accountable. And it opened up a whole new world and a new group of people, like the lawyer Massimiliano Sereni and his family in Italy, and Louis Daniel Martin and Gloria from Madrid, and in turn, many others. They formed a bond that would transcend borders and language, a bond that would drive them and tens of thousands of others for years to come.
Nel momento in cui si è venuto a conoscenza che la società a cui erano state affidate le cellule di nostra figlia, quindi il materiale biologico di nostra figlia,
So, when we found out that the company storing our daughter's cells had basically vanished and no one knew where her biological material had ended up, we were seriously worried.
Se effettivamente il materiale è ancora conservato da qualche parte.
We didn't know if the material was actually still preserved somewhere, or worse, if it had been used for something, I don't know, like unlawful purposes, instead of just being kept safe like it was supposed to be.
Cada uno de nosotros tiene unas necesidades específicas.
Each of us has specific needs. There are parents who preserve their children's stem cells in case something could happen in the future, though nothing that would make them reach out for those stem cells has happened yet. And there are other parents, like me, who need those cells as soon as possible. We all help each other, no matter our needs.
I called CryoSafe because we needed an address for their legal team, because you have to, if you want to send somebody a legal document, you have to know where to send it for the legal team to open it. That's how it works. And someday somebody picked up and I said, you know, what's the address for your legal department? I have to know because I have to send you papers. And this person was, and then they said, well, we don't have a legal department. And I just stopped, and even though I was, of course, angry and extremely sad, I started laughing, and they said, don't worry, you will have one very soon.
That's next time on Lost Cells. Thanks to our voice actors on this episode, Luis Lopez as Louis Daniel and Nate Dufort as Massimiliano Sereni. I'm your host, Angela Saini.